Here is the answer to the puzzle I left with you with last lesson. The meaning of these three words in Gregg's shorthand. And the translation here into our regular longhand is make haste slowly. This is a good motto to keep in mind as you study the Gregg shorthand. Last lesson I told you that I wanted you to slow down and think carefully about how you were going to write any particular character that was representing a word. And then once you had that in your mind securely how you're going to write it, to go ahead and write it in one smooth motion. And so you're writing it quickly, but you're taking your time to think about it before you write it. And that's going to be crucial for building speed in the future, because you're going to get in the habit of writing these out as words instead of as individual phonetic letters. And that's one example where this maxim will come into play, and you will probably be able to identify others. So a good thing to keep in mind as we progress through the course. Make haste slowly. We're ready to get started on lesson 1.2. Lesson 1.2. We've got several objectives that I want to cover here. The first is the use of punctuation. I also want to speak about abbreviations. We'll talk about a strategy for using your practice sheets now that we'll be, you've already initiated one of them, and then I'll show you how to add on to that and use them on a continuing basis. And then I want to talk to you about daily useful writing and how to use that to increase your shorthand skills. So before we leave this whiteboard with the words written out on it, I want to draw a couple of things to your attention. So we're going to be talking about abbreviations today, and I want you to look, well, let's look at the words one by one. First, lesson. This is gone ahead and spelled out phonetically, L-E-S-N. Notice that I did leave out one of the vowels. Oftentimes if a vowel isn't stressed, you can just leave it out. And this one, there's no O sound in here for the un. I just put L-E-S-N. And if you listen to the way it's pronounced, lesson, it's really sin. You've got the S and the N sound, and the vowel isn't stressed at all. So it's perfectly okay to write it that way. Now, how do you tell if a word is written correctly in Gregg shorthand? If you know what it is, when you try to read it, it's written correctly. So there's nobody grading you. This is personal note-taking, Gregg shorthand for personal note-taking. So there's nobody grading you on it. The way you tell if you succeeded or not is if you can read what you wrote. So for me, this is lesson, and it works just fine. We're going to be talking about the abbreviations of words. So let's look at punctuation. Now this is very small in terms of letters for punctuation, and there's a lot of stuff left out. So let's see what we have. Here's a P, an N, a long U sound, and an ish. I actually looked this one up in a dictionary, and I'm going to show you the dictionary now. This is an old copy of a Gregg shorthand dictionary. You can tell this one has seen better days. It's flopping around a little bit. These were actually printed with fairly high quality, so the paper and the covers last for decades and decades. So you can find a lot of these on the secondhand market. And this one has lots of abbreviations. Now the stenographers would try to find the most efficient way for making a word character. And all it had to do was be recognizable as that particular word, give them the phonetic clues they needed to recognize it, and not conflict with other common words. So this type of a dictionary is very valuable for me, and will be for you too once we pass the phonetic stage, for determining very efficient abbreviations for words. So I use that here for punctuation instead of spelling it out. Now this next word, abbreviations, I did spell out, and it'll show you just how much longer some of these words can get. So we have an A, BR, you notice the BR kind of blend into one motion. BRE, here's a V. You know it's not a J because it's being written from top to bottom. And here's the EA sound, abbreviate, same sound you get in radiation. That one's not listed in your text, but this is a short way to write it. Is kind of like an I, but instead of the dash, you have a little E symbol inside it. And then the SH and the letter S. So the SH is the ish. Ish is, by convention, used for the shun sound. So we see it here in punctuation and abbreviation. So that is in essence an abbreviation itself. It's used. The shun sound is used a lot in English, and so if you need to do that, just write the SH at the end of the word. That's worth writing down in your notes because it's not in your text and you're going to use that a lot, that abbreviation for shun. But notice one of the drawbacks here of Gregg, if you write things out, is they can get very long. I had to start this one way up on the other line and run it all the way down here. So that happens sometimes. If you find that happening a lot, you'll want to look up a nice abbreviation for the word so it doesn't happen. Otherwise, you may run into the line below. If so, just work around it when you get down to that line. Okay, just to look over a few more of these words. Here's the word practice, PR. Notice how the PR all blend into one smooth stroke. And here's an A, K, T-I-S, practice. And sheets, I've got an ish, E-T-S, sheets. And finally, for daily useful writing, here's a D-A-L-E, daily, useful. So here's an U-S-F-U-L, useful, and R-I-T, and the ing dot, so write-ing. We're going to make up an abbreviation now. This is not an abbreviation that anybody else knows about, but we're going to make it up for purposes of this course. And it's going to drive home, I hope, one of the fundamental ideas about abbreviations when used for personal note-taking, and that is you make them up as you need them, and you use them as you need them. So if you have something that you write over and over, you might want to think of a shorter and quicker way to write it. That's the whole idea behind the shorthand. Nobody else needs to know what it is because you're going to be the one that reads it. So I'm going to, during the course of this lecture series, have several times when I need to tell you this is important, write it down in your notes. And so I need a quick way of communicating that in writing. So we're going to come up with something. Now, the Romans had a way to do that, to say note something well. They would say nota bene. And that just means note it well. Sounds kind of neat when you say it in Latin. So I like that one. So let's think of a way that we can write this very quickly in shorthand. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the N, and I'm going to use the B, and I'm going to cross them. So this is my shorthand for the two words nota bene. And when you see that in this course, it's going to mean, hey, this is important, you better write it down in your notes. I'm going to usually be using this when I'm saying something that is not in the text you're using, and I think it will benefit you. For instance, a little earlier, I told you about how the ish at the end of the word could be used for the shun sound, like in, what did we use it for? Punctuation. You can use that ish to, instead of writing out the whole shun element. So anyways, this is our creation for nota bene. Now, someone else, for instance, if you have a job as a pipe fitter, you might want to use this NB symbol for nominal bore. So for you in your notes, you might want to use the same thing. If you have a job as a traffic reporter, maybe you want this symbol, NB, cross, to be northbound. Right? So it could be a bunch of things. And you can't even tell which comes first, the B or the N in this symbol. So maybe if you have a reason for abbreviating BN, maybe you are a bookseller, and you often have to notate the bookseller Barnes and Noble. You might want to use this symbol for Barnes and Noble, and you can write it very quickly. So again, it can be, it's an abbreviation that's very personal. It's based on what your writing habits are. For us, it's NB. This kind of trick of crossing the letters helps to keep from confusing it with another word. So, I might have a word with a B and an N in it, and if I just wrote them out and connected them in the way I usually do, it could lead to more confusion. This tells me it's not a regular Gregg letter, it's some kind of combination, and it's probably some kind of abbreviation. So you'll see this if you look at other Gregg suggested abbreviations for larger things. Like I mentioned earlier, the court reporters might say, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. They might have an abbreviation for that. It would probably be something like this with 2 key letters that were crossed or in some abnormal juxtaposition where they would know that it symbolized that whole phrase. So anyways, watch for this symbol in the course. It means this is important and worth writing down in your notes. Let's talk a little about our practice sheets. Now you started a practice sheet after our last video lesson. This is the one that I had used to show you how to initiate it. Now you should have at least a couple of columns filled up, and you're probably into your second page or your third page, depending upon how widely you spaced your words. And there may be some leftover on the final sheet where you ran out of words and you don't have any more words to put on there. I'm going to talk to you now about how we're going to take these practice sheets, continue to use them, and build on them. So we're going to add to what you have during this lesson. So I'm going to flip over to one of my practice sheets now that I'm currently using to show you how these things can evolve. So I had several words here I was working on. Some of these are things that I just used in my note-taking, and I found that they were useful, and I wanted to get quicker ways to write them maybe, or it took me a while to figure it out the first time, so I wanted to practice it for whatever reason. And you can see I made some mistakes as I went through here, just like you guys are probably doing. And some words are pretty problematical, like this what. As time went on, I added more things. So I only had this much. Then I found some other words I wanted to work on, so I added them here. And you can tell as I practiced, I'm all the way done with these, and now I'm just starting with these. That's okay. Just keep adding stuff to the bottom of the sheet. And when you do your practice, you're going to start at the empty columns, come over till you find something that's not empty. Okay, and now you can practice filling in these. Then here you've got another few things to practice. Here you've got something else to practice. Here you've got some other things to practice. So you can just continue evolving with the same sheet like this. The last thing I wanted to show you here is when you get to the end. For instance, here's the word what. And you notice I've been having some problems with that because there's some red. I made some mistakes a couple times. I'm trying to get myself used to the convention that's used in a lot of Gregg shorthand, and I keep writing it a different way. So anyways, I obviously need some more practice on this. So when I ran to the end of the line, what I've done is I went to the bottom, to the first empty line, and you'll see that I've reproduced it here. So this means I'm going to get more practice until I fill this up here. If there's still a bunch of red on it where I'm still screwing up, I'm going to write it at the new beginning of my sheets. And obviously, so you may have several sheets you're working on. As these fill up, once this whole sheet is filled up, I can toss it away or save it, whatever you feel like doing. But you'll always have something like this, where you've got some words in progress, some where you've been practicing for a while, others that you just started practicing, etc. In a minute or two, we're going to be working on punctuation. And so you can just add the punctuation symbols to the bottom of your existing sheet and continue practicing them like you have been with the other words. And when we get on to the lesson 2 words later, you will be able to add them onto your same sheets. So you should, when you're done, you should have filled up sheets. You shouldn't have any half sheets and then have to go to the next lesson and start a new sheet. We're going to look at punctuation now. Nota bene. put these in your notes. They can go on to the practice sheet with the other previous words that you did. Just put them onto the bottom. So first of all, capitals. So far we've just given you these letters representing sounds, and there's no uppercase and lowercase for them. So how do you indicate a proper noun? I've already mentioned this to you before, but let's say we have a person's name like Jim. So we're going to get a big J-I-M, Jim. But to know it's a name and that it should be capitalized, we're just going to put these two lines under the end like that. So that indicates proper noun. It's something that would be capitalized. You don't need to do that for the first word in a sentence. That's just kind of a convention of our English language that really doesn't add a lot of information for us. But sometimes a name, maybe you might need that. Okay, for a period, we're not going to use just a regular dot because a dot's used for something else. I'll tell you later on in this lesson what that dot is for. But for a period, we're going to use a little dash symbol like this. For a paragraph, for Gregg, you're just going to keep writing. When you come to the end of a paragraph, you're not going to waste a lot of paper by not using that, but you can put in this little mark here, and that'll tell you that you reached the end of the paragraph. For a question mark, that could get confused with other Gregg symbols, so we're not going to use the regular question mark. We're just going to use a little X for the question mark. And parentheses, you can tell parentheses, that looks pretty much like a B or a V or a P, so you could get that confused. So if you're writing parentheses, just put a little dash through them, and that's going to indicate that it's not a letter, it's actually a parentheses. And same thing, just a regular dash by itself, that could get confused with an M or an N. So if you need a dash, just double it up, and that will indicate that it's not a letter. Okay, I need to go for a little bit further. So any other punctuation mark, you should be able to use the regular English. For instance, commas, they usually go in pretty well. They don't get confused. One other thing, let's see if I have a little bit of room left here. Let's say that you need to, there's an abbreviation in English that really saves us a lot of time. Let's say like we don't want to write out Environmental Protection Agency, even in Gregg. That's going to be kind of long. So in English, it's abbreviated EPA, and that saves us a lot of writing. Even if we wrote this out phonetically in Gregg, it would be a lot longer than just writing out EPA. There's a couple ways you can do it. You can write out EPA in English and just put it right in the middle of your Gregg. That's an acceptable way to do it. Or what I like to do is I write them out in Gregg. So I just do the little circle for the E, I do the P, and all these are disconnected, and then I do the big circle for the A, and then I just underline them like that. And that tells me that these are just actually letters, and it's something like EPA. And from there, I can figure out what it is. And so that's a shorthand I use. Again, some people just write it out like this. If you write it out like this, other people are going to be able to have a clue about what you're writing about because they'll see recognizable English things that are in your notes. They won't be able to figure that out. And I like this. Also, the letter forms are a little more convenient. You can write this little circle faster than you can write an E. Yeah, you can write this P faster than you can write a P, and you can write this circle faster than you can write an A. So this is the way I use, but you've got a couple of ways you can go with those English abbreviations. I want to talk to you about some of the pre-existing art here. And it took me a little while to find these. I mentioned earlier on, I think in the introductory lesson, that most of the preliminary or most of the previous material on Gregg shorthand was aimed towards stenographers and court reporters, secretaries that would be taking dictation, etc. And that is true, but there is an exception. There was an effort made to create a course on personal note-taking, using Gregg shorthand for personal note-taking. And I want to show you that existing those existing courses. It was called Gregg Nothand, and it was made for the high school student or perhaps a college student, beginning college student, and the emphasis was on using Gregg shorthand for taking notes. This first came out in 1960, and you can see this one was used at Milwaukee Lutheran High School. It's set up for a high school student, and it's probably like a semester course or something. It's excellent material, and it's interspersed with material for on taking notes, good ways to take notes, to do outlines, etc. Many of the same topics that I'm covering here. It's not presented quite as efficiently as I'm presenting the material. Again, it's made to fill up a semester full of 5-day weeks for a high school student, and our objective is much tighter. We're not trying to teach you how to create an outline or the best ways to take notes. You probably already know that, or if you don't, you can go somewhere else to get it. We're tightly focused on the Gregg Nothand, and we're getting there as efficiently as we can. So we don't need this much material. I believe these materials are under copyright also, so we wouldn't want to just use these by themselves. But it's well worth your time. If you see one of these books, to pick it up, as you glance through it, you may find a lot of interesting things. So this came out in 1960. Back in 1968, they came out with a second version, and so you can tell the cover looks a little different. And they tweaked the material, I guess, in response to their first 8 years of teaching. So you might see it in this incarnation also. Again, two very good books. We're not going to use them, but they were aimed at the same objective that we're doing in this course. We're going to go over some common abbreviations for words. Nota bene. So common abbreviations. Let's take a look at this Gregg shorthand first. And this first word, common, is going to give us an example of an abbreviation. The initial K is often used for com or con. And here I'm using it for com, and then M-O-N, I'm covering two spaces with an M and one space with an N, and I've dropped the vowel. So this is common. I wrote out abbreviation earlier in this lesson. You saw how it got really long and shot into the lines underneath. This time I split it up. So I wrote A-B-R, and then E-V-I-A, and then the shun, ish is shun, and the S, abbreviations. So that's just something I did so it wouldn't hang way down here. I can recognize it, so it works. That's the key element. Remember, if you know what it means, when you read it back, then it works. Now, I didn't write this in English here, but a word that's often used in Gregg shorthand for these common abbreviations of single words is called brief forms. So when a word isn't completely spelled out phonetically, they say it's a brief form. For instance, common over here is going to be a brief form. And all these other words that we're going to look at today are brief forms. Now, these words are special words because they're very, very frequent in the English language. The words that we're going to look at today probably constitute 25 to 30% of all the words you're going to write in your notes. And since they're so frequent, it makes sense to maybe not spell them out phonetically, but find the most efficient way you can write them. And so I'm going to go over these. Now you have a choice. You don't have to use these brief forms. You can spell them out phonetically if you want. But learning to write them in this even briefer way will eventually save you a lot of time. So I'm going to give them to you right up now up front. And that way you can learn them this way first and not learn them phonetically and then try to unlearn that and relearn a different way. So it's up to you. But let's take a look at these words, starting with the word the. So that occurs a lot. I'm going to have to scoot over here so I can get over here. And we're just going to use a TH for the. The word of is simply going to be an O. I'm not going to put the F in. Again, because we write this so frequently, even that one extra stroke is going to add up over time. For and, we're going to use a couple of blended consonants, and we haven't talked about that yet, but we will. So this is basically an ND, and we're going to write them curved. Now, you're familiar with the flat N and then the D going up, and that would create an angle. In Gregg, we're going to talk about how you can blend consonants and create curves when that kind of thing happens. So this is going to be our symbol for and. And just know that it makes sense phonetically because it's an ND. And also it works for end. I wrote a little end down here in tiny little letters. So this could either be and or end. End's not used near as frequently as and in the English language, but that's a helpful abbreviation too. And again, it's evident from context which ones you mean. Now to, this isn't actually an abbreviation. This is just written out. It's to. But it's so frequent that that it's going to get on this list. So there's our T and our oo sound. And again, Gregg's phonetic. So this is the 102, the 202, and the number 2. Now, A. We use A a lot, and it's the dot. That's the reason we had a different symbol for period, because A, it turns out, is easier to write with just a dot. The word I, like I, and this is one I wanted to show you quickly, that's going to be the symbol for A. And we're actually, that's a little counterintuitive, but what we're doing is we're drawing on the experience of millions of stenographers who found out that this was a very efficient way to write things. Instead of putting this symbol up for the A and something else for the I, they found through practice that this is the way to write things. Remember, Gregg published this stuff in 1888. It caught on pretty quickly in America, went through several editions, and it had stabilized pretty much. But in 1916, they already had these conventions, and then that rolled forward into the anniversary manual. So we're going to capitalize on all of that experience and do this, which doesn't seem to make a lot of sense now, but trust me, it does make a difference in the speed with which you can write this later. So I is this form, it's actually the phonetic letter A, and the A is going to be a dot. For the word in, we're just going to use the letter N. So just one stroke. That also can stand for not, and the phonetic N sound. For instance, if we were going to write the word enter, E-N-T-E-R, we could just use this, N, and then T-R, or T-E-R, for enter. That is going to be T-H-A. And now, so phonetically, that would be they, or it could be they. There's another actual brief form for they, and we can get to that, or you can look it up later if you decide you want to go with this brief form for that. It, or at, is just the letter T. Is the letter S, curved that way. R, or our, is the letter R. And will, or well, is the letter L. So learning these, what do we have here? We have 4 times 3. Learning these 12 brief forms or common abbreviations will again take care of 25 to 30% of all the words you're ever going to write in your notes. You have some new material now on punctuation and some brief forms that you can add to your existing word list. So we'll be going over the assignments for today. The addition of those elements to your existing word list is one, and go ahead and complete 2 columns of practice on each of those, and also continue practicing on the words from the first video lesson prior to starting up the next lesson. If you finish up some of the words in your first video lesson and you noticed a lot of red mistakes on it, go ahead and forward that to the end of your word list and keep working on it till you can go all the way through and you don't see a lot of red on it. Now, in addition to that assignment, there's going to be another assignment on daily writing. So nota bene, this is going to be an ongoing assignment for the rest of the time that you're studying this course. Every day, I'd like you to do some daily writing. So I want you to do something useful every day with your Gregg. So now you know how to write things. You can write theoretically anything with the phonetic alphabet that you've learned. Might not be the most efficient now because you don't have all the abbreviations, but you can write down anything. So some suggestions for what you can use. Shopping or to-do lists. That's one thing, and it's going to be hard for you at first, but the key is do something useful. So lists don't have to be too long, and they're useful. A lot of learning is going to take place when you sleep, so doing something every day and then sleeping with it, and trying it again the next day is going to be very helpful, especially if you say write a to-do list, and then you have to figure out what it means in the morning. That's going to be very helpful for you. It's hard at first. It gets easier and easier, and then as that happens, the Gregg is going to get more and more useful to you. I do want to note something in this line here. A couple of things. Here's shopping, and I use the ing dot. We've got or blended together for or. This is what's called a phrase. So I've actually stuck two words together, and this is often done in Gregg, so especially with short words. So I've got to, the T and then the oo hook, and then do, the longer D and then the oo hook, to do. And that's all in one character. So you can lump small words especially together like that, and that will make your writing go faster. Okay. Another thing, say you don't have a to-do list or shopping list to do and you're not sure what you can do that's useful, go ahead and transcribe a news article. That is always there. You can always do it. And it has an element of utility to it. So if you can't find anything that you really need to write down, write that down. What you're doing is aiming for 10 minutes a day of this activity, of writing and reading your lists. And you want to make sure this last element that you read what you write. So don't just write it and put it up. Try to read it. Otherwise, you're going to get really good at writing and you're never going to be able to figure out what you wrote. So put as much effort into reading what you write as you do into writing it. This happens every day for the rest of the course. I'm ready to give you your puzzle for the next lesson. It's here on the board. Take as much time as you need on this in the next lesson. The videos will always be here for you, so make sure you have the 2 columns of elements practiced before you come to the new lesson. You can take a look at this. You may not be familiar with all the abbreviations, but I think anything that's in here that's abbreviated you should be able to figure out. And there might be some things where I've just dropped a hint previously, but you haven't studied it yet. So it's a bit of a puzzle. See what you can do if you can get the text, and we'll talk about it at the beginning of the next lesson.